Hello, fellow faith processors. Welcome to Faith in Process, the show where we explore how real people process their faith in their work, in their writing, and in their everyday lives. Today, Harry and Scott Holland chat about how we can be good neighbors and take care of ourselves in a world of complex issues. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to all of you faith processors in the room, and welcome to all of you out there that are processing your faith and listening to this podcast. This is Faith in Process. My name is Harry Jarrett. I'm the pastor here at Pleasant Valley Church of the Brethren in Weir's Cave, Virginia. And we are gathering this morning with Scott Holland, who is a regular on the show and in the Sunday school class. Really excited to have you back, Scott. Thanks for coming. Scott is a professor emeritus at Bethany Theological Seminary. He has been a professor there for many, many years, professor of the Peace Studies for 23 years, started the Theopoetics program there, is a prolific writer and theologian and practitioner of just peace, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I asked Scott to come primarily today because of my personal confusion and struggling with the tapestry of what is going on in the United States at this time in regards to immigration and how the government and how the people and how folks are trying to work through this issue, and in particular what we as followers of the way of Jesus and the Church of the Brethren, how are we supposed to understand what's going on? How are we supposed to work with what's going on? And I thought, I don't know anybody better than you, Scott, to help me think through this, help others think through this, and give us a little bit of theological, practical advice on what are we supposed to think about this? What are we supposed to be doing about this if we genuinely want to follow the way of Jesus? So, I'm going to let you talk a lot today, Scott. At least I'm planning on that. I'm probably going to interject some questions and confusion into the whole thing. But for now, Scott, help us out. What are we supposed to be thinking right now? What are we supposed to be thinking about right now in regards to all of this stuff?
Well, thanks, Harry. I'm coming to you this morning from my office in Pittsburgh. As Harry mentioned, for over 2 decades, I had an office at Bethany Theological Seminary, and now I work out of 2 locations, a location in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is my writing studio, and then an office here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my office isn't very far from Fred Rogers' neighborhood, Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Some of you might know that Fred Rogers was an ordained Presbyterian minister, and his program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was viewed by him as a form of ministry. And Fred Rogers was committed to building peaceful relationships with all. And in fact, a number of Presbyterian churches in the city of Pittsburgh installed peace poles in memory of Fred Rogers after his death. And I, in fact, officiated at one of those events and spoke at another. Fred Rogers, as some of you know, emphasized what it means to be neighborly or a good neighbor. And as I've been following the news, as most of you have, of the violence in Minneapolis, a reporter was interviewing one of the persons on the street, speaking out against the abuses of ICE. And the reporter asked the citizen, "How did you get involved in activism?" And her response was, "I'm not so sure that I'm involved in activism. I think I'm involved in neighborism. I'm simply here to be a good neighbor. I'm concerned about what is happening to my neighbors. And I'm here trying to be a good neighbor, loving my neighbor as myself." So I would say, first up, as followers of Jesus, we are invited, and in fact, we are called to love our neighbors, not love our church, love our doctrine, love our theology, love our hymns and our prayers alone, but love our neighbors as ourselves. And so I think as we explore these questions and the events before us today, it's important to remember our calling to be neighborly. And for anyone who might be uneasy with activism, neighborism might be a label that we can step
Sure.
into and stand with and for and by our neighbors who are facing injustice. Because clearly, I think what we're seeing on the streets in Minneapolis in many cases is that the line between a deep democracy and the rule of law is being crossed over into expressions of tyranny and violence, with two killed on the streets and so many others apprehended, some of whom now we know had legal basis to be in the United States. This should cause us as followers of Jesus and also as citizens of the democracy of the United States to be quite concerned and to raise the questions, Harry, that I think you are raising and explore those questions together. I can pause a minute if you want to push in one direction or another.
Well, I love that, the idea of reframing neighborism, or using neighborism as opposed to activism. I like that. Um, I I can't remember who it was. Maybe yeah, I can't remember exactly who it was, but um, oh, maybe it was Whitehead who said that in order to talk about God and theology in different ways, we have to create new language, and new words. We have to actually come up with new words that don't have an already established meaning and understanding, and perhaps multiple meanings depending on what which direction you come at it from, or what history you come at it from. That we have to come up with different language and different words so that we can then talk about, okay, this is what we're saying when we're saying this. And I think talking about neighborism as opposed to activism, I think helps with that. I was speaking with someone the other day and saying, I don't, at this point, I don't like, I, I'm hesitant to tell somebody I'm a Christian because there's so much baggage that comes with that. And so I am when people say, who are you and what are you doing? I say I'm a follower of the way of Jesus, right? Or I'm following the Jesus way of being and living. Because then people say, well, what does that mean? Um, and so maybe in this context of everything that we're doing, since since the language that we have used in the past carries so much baggage, we do need to come up with words, new words that say what we're trying to do and be, kind of like what you did with just peace, or what the Mennonites have done with make peacemaking, or making peace, or pursuing peace. Um, as opposed to just talking about, we want peace, because that can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think that's right. And searching for fresh, new, novel ways of naming ourselves and what we perceive to be the ways of God in the world, I think can be very inviting. So, myself, I am very involved in expressions of activism, but I'm aware that what we're seeing now is something that it is a call for more than mere activism. Neighborism can be a way of inviting others into that task. And this idea of looking for new language is very much a part of theopoetics, which we've talked about before
Right.
together, Harry.
Yeah.
So I think that can be something to name. And this whole notion of what it means to be a neighbor, I think, is very central to our faith journey.
Mm-hmm.
Activism has an important role as well, because what we're seeing now, and we are seeing some shifts just this week from last week in terms of how ICE is operating on the streets of Minneapolis, small shifts, and we are hoping to see greater shifts. Those shifts were brought about by public pressure, by
Mm-hmm.
people in the streets. And so certainly movements like the civil rights movement of Dr. Martin Luther King and company were very important in terms of placing public pressure that then could lead to some political change.
Mm-hmm.
So the anti-war movement, concern about just peace in Gaza and other locations in the world often invites us into forms of public protest and activism. But I think calling our work neighborism and tying it how we understand our responsibility to the other, I think can be really important. This week, I pulled out a quotation from a book that I've used in class. The book is entitled See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love by Valerie Carr. And the quotation that spoke to me was the quotation that deals with violence and wonder, wonderment or awe. And Valerie Carr, who is a practitioner of the Sikh faith, sees a relationship between wonder about the holy and wonder about the neighbor in terms of the prevention of violence. I'll just read two paragraphs here. Valerie Carr says, but you don't have to be religious in order to be open to wonder. You only have to reclaim a sliver of what you once knew as a child. If you remember how to wonder, then you already have what you need to learn how to love. Wonder is where love begins, but the failure of wonder is the beginning of violence. Once people stop wondering about others, once they no longer see others as part of them, they disable their instinct for empathy. And once they lose empathy, they can do anything to them or allow anything to be done to them. Harry, I think when we think about the difference between immigration enforcement currently and immigration reform enforcement in previous administrations. After all, Barack Obama was called um, the immigration enforcer in chief because that administration practiced immigration enforcement, but according to the protocols, more protocols of just law, the rule of law, and I think being attentive to the welfare of the other. I think what we're seeing now is a lot of chaos in the streets, a lack of empathy, a lack of respect for the otherness of the other.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that people, I think in history, have been able to do horrible things to other people is by taking their names away, and by demonizing them. And it seems to me that in many ways, that's what it feels like a little bit. I don't remember the demonization of illegal immigrants happening in the past the same way it feels like it's happening now. I don't remember that every single illegal immigrant was a mobster being said. I mean, they might not. I think Barack Obama administration um, deported like 400,000 or 500,000 immigrants, more than any administration had done in a long, long time, and that has decreased since his administration. I don't know. Maybe he just so I don't know all of that exactly why or what, but I don't remember the rhetoric and this just all of this visceral response to what's going on. And um, I don't know how to handle it. I don't know, as a pastor or as a follower of Jesus, what am I supposed to do? I'm just, truth be told, I'm not going to fly out to Minneapolis, right, and just hit the streets. I'm just not gonna. This is not going to happen, especially with all the snow, right? But so how what am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to do as a local congregation, other than pray, other than talk about it, other than write Substack articles about it? Are there things that we can do so that when this is all said and done, we're on the right side of history?
Yeah. Well, the great poet of American democracy, Walt Whitman, suggested that if we really want to see a deep democracy in society, and by that he meant the practice of equality, the practice of justice, the practice of freedom, showing concern and recognizing the dignity of our neighbors. If we really hope to see a deep democracy rather than a tyranny in society, we must cultivate a democracy of the soul. And one of the reasons I still
You
go to
love that.
church,
You say that all the time.
yeah, one of the reasons I still go to church is to help cultivate a democracy of the soul, to make space within myself for the strangers without, and sometimes even the strangers within my psyche, soul, and body, and to show radical hospitality to those around, to love my neighbor as myself. And so there are many paths, I think, to the practice of a deep democracy. One is, of course, cultivating a democracy of the soul. But in terms of tangible expressions, then um, becoming involved. Um, a small thing is being in touch with our representatives, our political representatives in state and federal government to express our concerns. Uh, Another way is actually to be out on the streets, to place public pressure that might, in fact, move political realities. I think also extending kindness and care in a tangible way to those who feel threatened, to those who are experiencing violence and injustice. All of these things, I think, are part of seeking cultures of peace, because it's too easy to seek a doctrine of peace in church. A culture is much more of a practice, a mode of being in the world, a mode of being with others, and to look for those opportunities. And I think, in light of what is happening, um, just in recent days, we are seeing some hopeful shifts from the chaos and violence and, dare I even say, hateful rhetoric that was being manifested a few days ago. We need to keep the pressure and keep the peacemaking active and alive, because democracy is not something that is ever achieved. It is a continuing project. And I do think those of us who are in the free church tradition, what is sometimes called the believer's church tradition, the traditions of Anabaptism, pietism, um, those traditions really favor a more democratic way of being with others rather than a hierarchical way of being in relationship with others.
Sure. And then, of course, as the Church of the Brethren, we have the um, the organization On Earth Peace that has really appropriated the Kingian peacemaking and training and all those kinds of things that folks can go to and learn how to be peacemakers in that sort of civil rights Kingian way that while not completely successful, had a lot of success, right? It did move the needle significantly in what I would consider a good direction.
Yeah, I think a very good direction. And I'm a strong supporter of our denominational agency, On Earth Peace. And many of my friends are working for On Earth Peace or have worked for On Earth Peace. I have streamed some of their staff into my peace studies classes at Bethany and Earlham School of Religion. So we're strong supporters of On Earth Peace and their educational work in Kingian nonviolence. When we think about protests, I've been thinking again about the 1963 March on Washington. That is the huge gathering in which Martin Luther King Jr. offered his I Have a Dream speech. And
About that.
in thinking about that gathering, which did have a profound impact on the broader culture, when King began that speech, it was a much more statute-oriented uh, talk about economic justice and economic rights, and it didn't quite have the musicality of some of his other speeches. This was actually in August of 1963, and he had actually given his Have a Dream speech uh, in June of that summer in Detroit.
Oh,
And as he was giving his planned speech there in DC, Mahalia Jackson, the great gospel singer, had been with him in Detroit, and she was standing behind King, and she was noticing that his speech seemed to lack musicality. And so you can hear Mahalia Jackson, if you listen to a recording of that speech, say, "Tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream." And Martin shifts and moves into his dream speech that we all know so well. That notion of the dream was influenced by the poet Langston Hughes. And on dreams, James Baldwin, who was a great writer, a creative writer, as well as an activist, said this about the interior and the exterior life. Baldwin said, "Although we do not wholly believe it yet, the interior life is a real life, and the intangible dreams of people have a tangible effect on the world. The intangible dreams of people have a tangible effect on the world." So, our dream life, our interior life, our spiritual life, I think is profoundly important for those of us who care about social solidarity and social justice, holding those together, because the dream can become very tangible in the streets of the real world.
Sure. And once again, we're back at prophetic imagination, right?
We are.
Once again. All right. So we're going to pause right now. And because I always like to make sure that folks in the room have an opportunity to engage with the guests and ask questions and those kinds of things. So we're going to turn it to y'all that are in the room. And we actually have like 6 or 7 folks out there. All right. So we're going to let them chat a little bit and ask questions. Do y'all have any comments or questions or anything like that on for Scott or me? Are you just sort of dazed? Just speak up so Scott can hear you, all right?
Yeah, he made mention of the American democracy.
Can
We
you
do
hear
not
Scott?
have an American democracy. We have a constitutional republic. Nowhere in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, or the Bill of Rights is democracy mentioned. Nowhere.
Great question. And a constitutional republic is not anti-democratic, but I understand your point. And I would press you here to define what in fact is indeed a democracy. And here I would like to dispel some of the notions that democracy is mere majoritarianism. A constitutional democracy in a republic makes hospitable space for minority positions. So your question is correct. We're not talking here about a flat democracy. We're talking about a constitutional democracy within the context of a republic. Therefore, a democracy avoids the tyranny of a majority. A democracy is not mere majoritarianism, but it is a rule of law. It is a constitutional mode of governance that actually makes certain that there is freedom and justice for all citizens. I don't know if that helps, but to simply say we're not living in a democracy is not true. I've heard the argument of pitting a republic against a democracy, and we're talking about a democratic republic, which is different than a flat democracy of mere majoritarianism. You can push back against that if you'd like.
To me, democracy is mob rule.
He said to him, democracy is mob rule.
That's not democracy. I would point you, actually, a statement like that might be enhanced by reading the work of Sheldon Wolin, Wolin, His thick books on political theory and political philosophy can be really helpful. Democracy is not mob rule. Democracy happens within the context of a constitutional rule of law in a republic.
I have something to say.
Oh, Carol, yeah, speak up though.
So we did not have church.
Use your outside voice.
We did not have church last Sunday. And all of my kids happened to be home for fear of the snowmageddon. And I feel like I got a sermon from my daughters who are very concerned about what's going on. One of them has children, actually all my kids has children. You know, my youngest is pondering whether she should have children based upon how things are. So, my rule of life is encourage, pick up the pieces after things have happened. I am the peacemaker. But they sort of challenged me and said, well, Mom, maybe it's time that you start thinking about what you can be doing otherwise. I really like the neighborism term. And so they were very kind in how they chatted with me. But that's the reason I'm here this morning.
Okay. Did you get that?
I did get that. And, I think we can recognize that there are many ways to be peacemakers, and there are many ways to be good neighbors in a blessed, broken world. And I'm thinking of the words of the prophet Jeremiah. You can find this in the 29th chapter of Jeremiah. The Jews were living in exile, and some were feeling, it's kind of hopeless. We're not going to have shalom, peace, until we can return to Jerusalem. And the prophet says, yeah, you will return to Jerusalem someday, but here is what you shall do now. You shall build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat from them, take husbands, take wives, have sons, have daughters, and seek the peace of the city where I have placed you. For in the peace of this city, you shall find your peace. This was Babylon. This was not Jerusalem. So I think that's a wonderful message that we can live full, flourishing lives. Build houses, plant gardens, take partners, have children, and seek the peace of the city where you find yourself. For in seeking its peace, you will find your peace. I think that's an important calling, and maybe that message can be helpful to your daughters. It's not an either or, it can be a both and I think there are, again, many paths to seeking the complicated just peace of the city.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I struggle with is, peace, peace, I say to you, right? But there is no peace. You've got that scripture as well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For me, I am finding that everybody wants peace. It's not that anyone's saying I want chaos. Everybody's saying I want peace, but there are a lot of conflicting ideas on what that peace is going to look like and how that peace is going to be achieved. And so what do we do with that?
Yeah, and here's where it is complicated, because peace is not mere appeasement. A truce is not necessarily peace. And there can, in fact, be a peace that destroys many. And in times like these, we can remember those who sacrificed greatly, seeking a just peace, not only for themselves, but for their neighbors. And it often led to not only personal sacrifice, but the sacrifice even of their lives. And I'm thinking a lot these days about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, um, who said that at times we have to recognize that the answer is not peace, but a sword. And he's speaking metaphorically here because he was not advocating um, violence initially, but that the sword of division, that sometimes we have to separate ourselves from injustices. And Bonhoeffer led a movement with others in a church called the Confessing Church, which separated itself from the state church of Germany, which supported fascism and Nazism. So peace is complicated. The road to peace is complicated. It isn't always a quick and easy path to unity. At times, it is the sword. And again, I'm speaking metaphorically here. I am quoting Jesus, by the way. Bonhoeffer was referring to Jesus. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. And that sword was referred to as bringing division even within one's own family and one's own intimate circles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, that is the difficulty that I face right now. And I would imagine others face as well is, there are so many opinions about what the right thing to do is in these situations from people that we all care about. And there's, even families sitting at the dinner table who, kind of like what Carol was saying is, um, people we love are saying we should go this way, we should go that way, we should do this, we should do that, and they are opposing ideals and ideas, and that makes it really hard. I think. I mean, it seems harder than ever for me, and I don't know why. Maybe just because I'm actually thinking about it these days, but it just seems really hard right now to sift through it all.
It is hard. These are hard times, and I think some of my some of my friends and colleagues and students are having a hard time even focusing on their work because of these turbulent times that can be very decentering.
Yeah. We have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Our compass, our anchor, if we go back to what someone else has said of being Jesus followers, what did Jesus say? If you do it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. Okay, so that word empathy, that is what Christ had for the world, or he wouldn't have come, right? So what I'm trying to say is when we're trying to decide, when different people in our families and our friendship circle or whatever, our community have different ideas, just remember in how we treat one another, whether we agree or disagree, but how we treat the stranger, the least of these. That's what Jesus said. You have to put it in context of how you treat me as your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Then how are you going to treat your fellow human beings? That, if you don't have that context in your head, it's you got to have that compass on making decisions on what you say, what you do, how you put into place your faith, your actions, whatever, your thought process.
you get that, Scott?
For whatever that is.
I got that, and I agree very much. And I think that kind of mode of being with others requires a very deliberate focus and actually a kind of discipline, if you will. And since I'm zooming into a church today, I would say that church can help us with this. Church can remind us of this. You know, sometimes we go to church not simply to worship God, but to be reminded of what we already know and tend to too easily forget. And I think what you've just said about how we treat the least of these is very central to the spirituality and the social and personal ethics of Jesus. And that's a very important reminder.
Yeah, and Brenda, and I think most of us sitting in this room, I'm assuming, kind of have the same understanding of Jesus and what Jesus said and what Jesus encouraged. But I think I have to bring in the reality that there are a lot of people that are saying Jesus would have us do something different, like that all of this is that all of the deportations and the way that this is going, and that God's behind all of that too. And so you've got these what seems to be two sectors, two groups. There's probably more. Both are saying Jesus is with us and God is behind us, and this is what Jesus and God want us to do. And they are very, very different things. And everybody has their own scriptures they like to use. And they can point to places in the Bible that reinforce their individual ideologies. And they are competing ideologies. And so what do we do with that, right? And now it's 10:15, and you don't get to say much about that at all. So you're gonna have to come back. But that's happening, right? I mean,
Of course, yeah,
we
of
can't
course it's
pretend.
happening.
And so that makes it very difficult.
Yeah, it makes it very difficult. And so these are not what we're talking about here, any easy answers for these difficult questions. They're really calls and challenges to continue living the questions and living into the questions. And also, I think, living into our relationships with others, our relationship with the holy, our relationship with God. But indeed, we are baptized to join a struggle, some of the early Anabaptists said.
Yeah.
Um, and often it is a struggle.
Well, I think for myself, the the way that I'm working at living in the now and moving forward is by really pressing in and trying to look thoughtfully, critically, informatively at the past. We've got what, like 6,000 years of history that we can draw from to try to figure out how to be on the right side of all of this. So that's where I'm leaning into. I'm leaning into the past as much as I can to try to lean into a more hopeful, resurrected future.
Yeah. Yeah, because the past flows into the future. And this can be helpful indeed.
Well, Scott, as always, I got to go to church. Are you going to church today? I
Yeah,
mean, I know you're at church. You'll have service.
there is a service upstairs in the big sanctuary. So even though it is very cold here and blankets of snow everywhere, the singing sounds good. So I'm on my way up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Really, really appreciate it. We will talk more. Thank you for being with us, and thank you all for joining in on the conversation. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for listening to Faith in Process. If this episode sparked any questions, feel free to reach out to us or chat with a friend. And if you'd like more to listen to, pledge just $5 on Harry's Substack, and you can listen to the full uncut audio each week. That money goes a long way to supporting this meaningful mission. If you'd like to come visit us on an upcoming Sunday or see our list of future speakers, check the link in the description. Thanks for listening.